Homebrew videos. So we're going to talk about the homebrew videos that you can find at the link that you came up here on the YouTube playlist. My name is Dr. Nick Flynn, and I'm president of the Amarillo High Plains Drafters Homebrew Club. So first, we'd like to give you a little bit of information about the club. We meet. We have traditionally met on the second Friday of every month at 7:30 p.m. At Longwood and Spoon Brewery, which is located on off of Western up in Amarillo. Currently, of course, November 2020, we have been meeting by Zoom. That Zoom link is actually posted to our Facebook page. At the end of the video, I'll give you the information, and I'll also post that in the comment section of this video. But that link to the Zoom meeting is actually posted the week of the meeting. Officers that have the passcode, you can contact any one of those officers that are below there, and we'll be more than happy to set you up with the passcode so that you can get in there and learn about homebrewing. People typically bring their own homebrew, and we will sample it, provide any type of feedback that they're looking for. And we typically wrap things up somewhere between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. Though people are more than welcome to come and go as they please and how their schedule allows. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about these videos. Very first video that we show is one of the most important ones, and that is sanitation. You have to reduce the microbial load on it. And notice that I say reduce. We're not talking about eliminate. That's sterilizing. Is that you need to reduce the microbial load on your equipment so that the yeast can overcome those and you to give you an effective fermentation. This is one of the most important things to do next to cleaning. And what I like to say about cleaning is that if your equipment is not clean, there's no way you're going to be able to entirely sanitize it. And so that's certainly something to keep in mind when you're doing it. If it's not clean to the eye, you're not going to be able to properly sanitize it. The next video talks about grain milling, and that, of course, is where we are going to crush the grains that are in there. We're trying to expose all the saccharides that are going to be available to the yeast, and so we're going to actually use the enzymes from the grains themselves to bring about that conversion. But you don't want to crush those grains too much, or you end up with a poor filter bed, and you end up with something that's called a stuck sparge, something you really don't want to have happen. And then the next process after that grain has been milled, either by you or by a brew shop, we have this doughing in, which is actually the process of adding our grains to something called a mash tun. After that, we're going to modify the temperatures through a process called mashing. Basically, what this is done is we take this through either one or more. A lot of people are doing it through one step nowadays, but we will take the grains through one or more steps to activate or deactivate enzymes according to temperature. The next thing that we do is that after we've actually had converted those grain carbohydrates to fermentable sugars, is we are going to use a process called sparging. Sounds really fancy, but effectively what we're doing is that we are running water heated up to usually about 170 degrees Fahrenheit to rinse all the fermentables off of those grains, so that we can get it down into the wort and start making some beer. Removing hot break. This is a process that's really important. It's a process that some people don't use. Basically, what it's important to do is you're actually going to use a sanitized skimmer to remove some of the proteins and everything that come to the surface of the beer while it's boiling. And that's really important because that can actually affect fermentation. You can coat the yeast cells with this hot break material if you don't get rid of it, and that can certainly alter fermentation. It can also give you some off flavors in the beer. Then finally, once we've done that, and we're off and running as far as our getting the beer to boil, is that we're going to start adding some things to change the flavor and the characteristics of the beer. And one of the big things that we add, of course, is hops. And so at about 60 minutes, we'll add 60 minutes left in the boil. We will add bittering hops. And then about 15 minutes left to the boil, we'll add flavoring hops. And finally, about 5 minutes left in the boil, we'll add aroma hops. Other things that can be added, yeast nutrients and Irish moss or whirlfloc is actually what I use. can be added during the last 15 minutes. If you're doing an extract beer, maltodextrin is something that some people use to increase the body and head retention of the beer. If you are using a recirculating system, we move to the next video, and that's called hop spiders. And basically what this is designed to do is to keep some of that vegetal component from the hops out of the, or off of the filter pump, off of the pump filter, so that you don't clog that filter up. It does, I can say this from firsthand experience, it will reduce your hop utilization rates. And so you need to be aware of that. Last two videos deal with the process of actually cooling our wort down. So you're going to have wort that's about 212 Fahrenheit, somewhere between 205, 212 Fahrenheit, depending on where you are, and altitude-wise. And so we're going to rapidly cool that down. We're trying to get it cooled to less than 80 degrees Fahrenheit for sure. Some people like to cool right next to the right at their fermentation temperature. It depends on what your temperature control situation is. If you don't have any temperature control and you're simply doing it at room temperature, you probably want to get it a little bit cooler, because the process of fermentation is very exothermic. That is to say that it produces a lot of heat. Yeast pitching, this is actually where yeast is added to the cooled wort. Okay, so the recipe, and just in case you're interested, the recipe that's actually used in the videos is this recipe right here. 12 pounds of two-row, we call that base malt. And then we have some specialty malts in here, Carafa 3, English Crystal, and the Carafoam. The Carafoam is added to increase body and head retention in the beer. The other thing that I do, because I use a finer crush due to the system that I use to brew, is I added 1 pound of rice hulls. And this basically helps to improve the filterability of the grain bed, significantly reduces the chance that we will end up with a stuck sparge. The expected OG based on the efficiency of my system is about 1059. All right, water is extremely important. If you think about it, water is somewhere is about approximately 95% of beer, and so if your water doesn't taste good to you, you shouldn't be using it to drink to make beer. What I do is I use some drinking water from a local vendor and add calcium chloride and gypsum to it in order to help with my fermentation. There is the mash water that I use. I use 5.26 gallons. Now you can adjust these based on whether you want a thinner mash or you want a thicker mash. And that's basically a grain to water ratio. When some people talk about thinner or thicker, that's what they're talking about, is what's the ratio of water to grain. And then I also prepared 2.58 gallons of sparge water. Now at the end of the process, where we ended up sparging and everything, I collected 6.25 gallons of water. And the reason why I stopped right there, I actually had some more water there at the top of the mash tun, is because I know what my boil off rate is, and approximately my boil off rate is about 1 gallon in 90 minutes. Okay, so there are the hop additions. 60 minutes, I added a 5 HBU pack and a 3 HBU pack. HBU packs are really interesting. They stand for home or house bittering units, and these are actually used by brew shops to avoid year-to-year variations and alpha acids for a given hop variety. So, for example, your Centennial hops one year might be, I can't remember, let's just say 7.5 alpha acids, and then the next year they might be 9.5 alpha acids, so 9% alpha acid. So by using these home bittering units, it allows you to have a better control of what you're doing. So the next time that you use a recipe, all you got to do is just order that same set of HBU units. There are some I don't want to say conspiracy theories, but there's some other things that people think that why brew shops do these HBU units for bittering. But we won't go into that. 15 minutes. At 15 minutes left in the boil, we will add flavoring hops. The ones that were used in this particular recipe were the Falconer's Flight, and my Falconer's Flight was also used in the aroma hops. Some other additions that were used in the recipe: yeast nutrients. These actually give the yeast they're proprietary blends, so one can only guess as to what they have. But I would tell you, I'm guessing that they have minerals. They have amino such as like nitrogen. They have amino acids. They have some fatty acid as well. These yeast nutrients, I never brew without these. These do help to stimulate a very good fermentation, and they're added about 15 minutes left in the boil. The Whirlfloc there is actually technically, technically call, some people call Whirlfloc Irish moss. It's actually kind of derived from Irish moss, if you will. But basically, what this does is actually helps to get those proteins together, get them to drop out of solution, and that actually will help to clarify your wort. It'll also help avoid those proteins and stuff coming into contact with the surface of the yeast cell and causing some issues. Mash schedules here. I won't go into why all these because I'm trying to make this video just a little bit shorter. I won't go into all these. That video does talk about some of these temperatures and everything, but the long and short, this is what we call a step mash schedule. Most people are going to use a mash schedule that's somewhere between 150 and 100, or rather 145 and 155 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's what these numbers stand for. So they're going to use that for their brewing processes. Okay, so when we talk about original gravities, you might hear somebody say OG. It doesn't stand for original gangsta. It actually stands for original gravity, and so it's a specific gravity of the solution. You can measure that. You can measure the specific gravity, the original gravity, using a refractometer or a hydrometer. But basically, these are the details. So I like to do this pre-sparge OG right before I sparge. I will measure the original gravity. Obviously, it's going to go down, but this tells me whether I'm in trouble and whether I need to send somebody up to our brew shop, Amarillo Brewing Supply. They're off of Bell Street. Whether I send somebody off to our brew shop to get some dry malt extract or some other type of fermentable. I typically have those on hand, but it's always a good thing to do. Pre-boil OG is another one that's extremely important. I will mention that there are some really handy calculators out there that you can use if you're trying to figure out, what do you need, what volume do you need to reduce that through the boil in order to end up with the desired original gravity. My final OG ended up being 1.061, so we did a pretty good job of getting the correct original gravity. I will mention that what I basically did was I took my recipe and adjusted it to get to that original gravity, knowing what my efficiency of my system is. As far as the yeast that we used, that was a Safe Ale US-05. It's actually a dry yeast. I simply used that because I was running short of time and I didn't have time to produce a starter, a yeast starter for this particular one. The fermentation temperature range from Safe Ale itself is about, they say 64 to 82 on their technical sheet. Other suppliers that are out there have put that high range at about 74. I'd be really hesitant to ferment at 82 unless I was trying to do a particular style of beer or something like that. For me and myself, with some temperature control, that beer is fermenting currently at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, just to close, if you have any questions, feel free to contact one of your officers. You can also join our Facebook group. Take a look at it. It's a public Facebook group. There it is right there. I will post the link to this in this video once I get it uploaded to YouTube. And the other thing you could do is, of course, you can post your questions directly on those YouTube videos, and we'll take a look at them and get them answered for you. All right, so brew on.